I want to take some time in this video to share my story, to talk about why this work matters to me so much. I want to talk about why I know at the very core of my being that we can prevent burnout. I know why we need more burnout coaches. I know we need more burnout informed coaches. I know we need more of a burnout informed world. But I want to step away today from, I suppose, some of the science and some of the learning and some of the more kind of practical tools or advice or the kind of how to, or step away from the neuroscience or the somatics or the biology and talk to you human to human about my burnout experience, and maybe some of this will resonate for you too. I want to talk to you about burnout coaching and why doing this right matters so much for me. Now, I'm going to try and keep this as short as I possibly can, but I do get very passionate about this. I get very driven by all of this, and I want to, just connect with you human to human, to talk about burnout, to share some of my experience and why this matters. Now I'm going unscripted and hope that some of it resonates, because I think it's sometimes really easy, isn't it, to see the professionals, to see the experts, and to maybe look at us, look at them, look at me, and think, well, they don't know what it's like to really live this, right? They might have done the learning. Yeah, they can talk the talk, but they've never really walked the walk. And I want to say that I know what it is like to live with burnout, not just once, but twice. My first burnout made me really seriously ill. My second burnout nearly killed me. I'll share a little bit about both of those in this video. But I also know that if my coaches, now I'm 12, 13 years out of burnout number one now, in and around burnout one and burnout two, I was working with incredible coaches. But I was also working with therapists. I was going back and forth to doctors, trying to understand what was going on with me, trying to understand what was happening to my body and my brain, and the fact that I couldn't make a simple decision. I seem to have overnight gone from being this kind of high achieving, high performing, really confident, intuitive woman that if you needed something doing, you give it to Kelly, right? Kelly's gonna fix it for you. Kelly's gonna make sure that it works. And I would do it to the very, very, highest possible standard ever, right? I was a get shit done kind of person. And then overnight, I was struggling to pick up a glass of water. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. My intuition, this gut feel, this intuitive way of living that I'd had my entire life, it was almost like my intuition had just kind of left the building. Like, I'm not here for that anymore. I struggled with decision making. I struggled to be able to trust myself. I genuinely struggled to be able to move forward. And then it's almost like I was kind of able to park all of that. It's like I was able to kind of disconnect my brain and my body, right? Everything that was kind of happening over here, we could forget about that. Everything that was happening over here, we could just forget about that and just carry on going anyway. So I definitely, after burnout one, right, I could still mask to an extent. I could still perform to an extent. I could still pretend that I was okay to an extent. And then burnout number two came, and that one almost killed me. Now let's talk a little bit about both of those, and then maybe why I am so passionate about what I do, and why I genuinely believe that coaches are like the missing piece of the puzzle. Coaches are the magic ingredient, the secret weapon in the fight against burnout. Now, of course, I'd love all of us I'd love leaders and managers and doctors and therapists and partners and kids. I'd love the entire world to be fully burnout literate. I would love the entire world to be fully burnout aware. I would love the entire world to be fully burnout informed. The reality is that that's unlikely to happen, particularly with where we are at the moment. But as coaches, I genuinely believe that when you know this work, when you can do this work fully and properly, you can be the difference between a client that is able to walk away from, to not get to burnout in the first place, and or come through recovery more smoothly, shall we say, and a bit more quickly, right? Less alone, less isolated, less feeling like they were the one to blame, right? Less feeling like they were the failure. It's their fault that they got to this point. When you as a coach can do this work brilliantly, you can genuinely be the difference for every single one of your clients. And I know that because I see it in the coaches that I train. I know that because I see that with the clients that I have coached. I know what the world looks like for our clients when we're able to do this work properly, not through guesswork, not just through lived experience. So if you have lived experience and now you're coaching through this stuff, that lived experience matters, but your lived experience does not equal expertise. So I'll come on to, I suppose, a bit more about coaching in a moment. I said I was going to be quick, didn't I, with this video? I'll keep it as short as I possibly could do. But I suppose if we go kind of way back, right, way back, my parents will tell you that I came out of the womb as a bit of a stubborn, high performing, high achiever. What I wanted, I went for. If I said I was going to do something, I did it. If I wanted to achieve something, I made sure it happened. I was moved up a year at school. I got top grades. I was in top sets. Some stuff I didn't really have to try for. And lots of stuff, if I didn't think I was good enough at it, I might not even try in the first place. But the stuff that I was good at, I really excelled at. And I would get promotion after promotion and pay rise after pay rise. And I could solve issues before anybody else saw them coming. I was being headhunted for positions. If I went for a job interview, I got the job. Lots of things kind of came really naturally to me, but I was excelling in the workplace. Over an 8-year period, I had 7 promotions. I added during those 8 years more than £100,000 to my salary. And then I was headhunted to go to an organisation. Now, the final organisation, the last employed organisation that I was in, was ultimately the one that contributed to my burnout. And on day one, when I walked into that job, my gut was literally screaming up, like, get out of this workplace, get out of here. And I cut, like, who walks out of a job on first day, right? You don't leave a job on first day. I put it down to first day nerves. I put it down to the fact that it was a bigger role than I'd done before. I then kind of also, it's like I paid £13,000 for my annual season ticket to do this job, right? To take this job, I paid £13,000 for my annual train season ticket. I was not walking out of here on day one, but my gut was, you need to get out of here. And I ignored it. And for months, my gut kept saying, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. And I didn't. And the more toxic the organisation got, the more really I dug my heels in. And when I say I dug my heels in, the more toxic it got, the more I thought that I could genuinely change this workplace, right? I knew it was bad. That's what they'd recruited me for, right? Ultimately, I'd been recruited to turn it around. And so there was a part of me that was thinking, I can't leave until it's fixed. Now, with hindsight, I absolutely should have walked out on day one. Maybe swallowed the cost of my season ticket, maybe got a job around the corner. I don't know. But with hindsight, I should have done that. Now, I've been within that company for about 3 years. And I'd gone back into work after a Christmas period, and I was walking straight back into a project that I didn't believe in, that I thought was unethical, that I thought was immoral, but they said they were doing it anyway. And I thought, well, if you're doing the project anyway, I need to be the one to lead it, right? Because I'm not letting you lot touch it and do it in the worst possible way ever. So if the project has to be done, I will do it, because I'm going to make sure that people are focused on first. So I hadn't really switched off over that Christmas break. I'd gone back into this really toxic project, one that I absolutely did not believe in. And by lunchtime on that first day, I was struggling to stand. I had this excruciating pain come in my stomach to the point that I couldn't stand off my chair. I couldn't kind of stand up straight. I was kind of hunched over, bent over. And my colleagues sat on this panel with, like, Kelly, you've got to go home. Right? I'm like, no, I don't. And so I didn't. I stayed. The following day, the pain had got worse, but I went in again because the project needed doing. If it was going to be done ethically, I needed to be the one to do it. Day 3, this is a Friday now. I'm really struggling to even carry my bag to get to the office. So I had to get a taxi from the station to the office, walk into the office. My colleagues are like, you should not be here. I'm like, if we're doing this, we're doing it properly. That night, I passed out on the train on the way home. Didn't realise I'd passed out until I hit my head on the sink in the train toilet and found myself on the floor. You do not want to find yourself on the floor of a train toilet. Now, I managed to get myself back to my seat. I managed to get myself off the train at the right station. But just as I was about to kind of pass out again from the pain, a friend of mine who'd been on the same train a few carriages back literally came up, caught me, and her and her husband took me to A&E. That was the first of 7 months of hospital admittances, of debilitating pain, of passing out. I was getting injured and bruised and hurt. But I very proudly, for 7 months, wore the badge of never taking a single day off. Now, if you look at some of my other videos, you will understand, right, why we struggle to stop, why we struggle to take rest. There's neuroscience and neurochemicals that explain why we do not feel that it's safe for us to rest, why rest isn't even an option. It's not that we're, it's not that we're like avoiding the rest. It doesn't even feel like it's an option. There was no part of me for those 7 months that even considered that I needed rest or a day off. So I kept on going and I kept on going and I kept on going. Now, in the July of that year, I ended up having 2 operations in 48 hours, for which I did take a couple of weeks off for. And I had a gorgeous all-inclusive family holiday to Greece with my husband, my then husband, and my sons. But in between that holiday and the operations, I'd spent a day on the sofa watching back-to-back daytime TV. All of the chat shows that you could get like 24/7, right? If you just change the channel. Now, I would say at the time it was the daytime TV that had made me look as bad as I did, but my sons had come home from school and they'd taken one look at me and their faces had dropped. And my response to them was, don't worry, right? Everything's going to be okay. Mum's going to be back at work soon and everything's going to be back to normal. Because how many of us measure our health by our ability to work? My response in that moment was to tell my sons that I would be back at work soon, because that was a measure of mum will be okay. And my sons said to me at that point, they took a look at each other. I've got twin sons. They looked at each other. They came to sit on the coffee table next to the sofa. And one of them said to me, but mum, we don't want you to go back to work because your job is killing you. Now, I can tell you that the pain of that hit me harder than the 7 months of debilitating, excruciating, passing out pain that I'd been living through for 7 months. And that was what made me realize like something needed to change, something had to change. And I suppose that was, if you like, the first iteration of the burnout equation, even though I didn't realize it at the time. But I understood that I had lost a huge part of my sense of self. I was not working in line with my values and I was working in a very toxic environment. So I made the decision that when I did go back to work after this holiday, things were going to change. I was going to get straight back to my values. I wasn't putting up with the toxicity in the environment. I wasn't putting up with toxic colleagues. I was going to argue the point. And if I wasn't meant to be in that organization, I wasn't meant to be in that organization. I'd start looking for work elsewhere. And I did start to look for work elsewhere, but all of the work and all of the cultures and everything just looked exactly the same. And I wasn't going to go from one to the other. So I just carried on looking. But I was at the time finishing off my exec coaching qualification. And it was during that I heard myself say for the very, very first time that I was going to start my own business. That's what I did. So within 3 months, with no financial cushion whatsoever, my ex-husband and I ploughed every single penny into buying and doing up a house. There was nothing. There was absolutely nothing left whatsoever. But I left and I started an award-winning people and change consultancy. Clients within the first few weeks. I'm doing talks on big stages. I'm being recognised. Life is good. Work is good. Everything's going brilliantly. But I still had this niggle. What had happened to me in that workplace? Then I received 2 phone calls in 48 hours. The first was to tell me that the woman that had replaced me in my exec role had died in her room on her own whilst away on a leadership residential. 2 days later, I received a phone call to tell me I'd become the 4th in my role to become seriously ill as a result of that organisation. And at that point, I knew something bigger needed to change. Now, I was an HR director. I was an award-winning, headhunted HR director, right? I was seen as very, very different. I had been ripping up handbooks. I'd stopped doing annual performance appraisals years before. I'd been ripping up handbooks. I'd been doing, people first workplaces and genuinely making work better for everybody, seemingly not myself. There'd also been something I knew that the other HR directors had left in quite quick succession, but I assumed they must have been the issue, because that's what happens in organisations, isn't it? If you leave under a bit of a cloud, never to be talked about again, right? Call it kind of Harry Potter syndrome, isn't it? Right? It's a bit like Voldemort. You must never be named again. So I knew they'd left. I knew something had changed. I knew something had happened, but I thought they just couldn't have been very good at the job, right? Maybe they couldn't hack the level of intensity within this organisation. They must have been the issue. But to find out that I'd been the 4th to become seriously ill, my replacement has died. This isn't just an organisation problem, although that's part of it, but this is also like a sector problem. Now, I reached out at the time to the CIPD, the accrediting body, the awarding body for HR professionals, and said to them, got this thing, like, what are you doing to support the well-being of HR? And they said, contact your EAP. right? Your employee assistance provider. Now, I was running my own consultancy at the time. I had my own team that was growing. I was working with my own clients. I didn't have an EAP, but that wasn't what I'd asked for. I said, what are you doing to help the people in the profession? And that's really what started me kind of joining the dots, because everything that I'd kind of seen, I didn't know it was burnout until I'd gone for my 6-week checkups with both of these consultants. They both mentioned this word burnout, but I thought they were a bit crazy, right? Because people like me don't get burnout. I was a high performing, high achiever. I thrived under stress. I thrived under pressure. I was the one that got shit done. If you wanted something doing, you give it to Kelly. So these two doctors have mentioned burnout, like they don't have a clue what they're talking about, right? Clearly they don't know me. I don't get to burnout. People like me don't reach burnout. No, thank you. But there was something within these two phone calls. There was something in that message from the CIPD that made me stop, that made me think differently, that made me realize that something maybe needed to change. So I began to look at and understand burnout, and I wanted to understand more about chronic stress. And I did a master's in organizational change and development, and the courage of leaders during times of change, right? What was it that was causing this fear, causing this toxicity, causing some of these issues within organizations? I studied and trained in hypnotherapy and psychotherapy. I wanted more tools to add to my coaching, because the more that I began to talk about burnout and my experience, the more clients I was attracting that were at or on the brink of burnout. And the normal coaching tools that I'd been trained in were not helping my clients that were at the brink of burnout. But from my own experience, the therapists that I was working with hadn't really been able to help me. The doctors hadn't really been able to help me. The coaches hadn't seen it coming. But the definitions that I was seeing about burnout and this kind of workplace thing that just left you feeling a bit cynical and a bit depleted and maybe a bit disengaged, that didn't understand the physical pain that I'd been under, that didn't understand the challenges that I was having with some decision making, that didn't understand why I couldn't even hear, let alone trust my intuition anymore. So I studied and studied and studied, and everything from psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, Reiki, yoga, understanding the body and the nervous system and the energetic fields within us, understanding biology, understanding nervous system, central nervous system, neuroscience, neurochemicals, joining all of these dots and everything that could, okay, that answers that bit, but what about this part? Why is that impacting my decision making? Why had I started to be in this pain? Why had I developed these two health conditions, lifelong health conditions, that I'd now needed this surgery for? So I started dot joining. I also, the more that I was learning, I really, really focused on my self-care, right? Total self-care, total well-being. And I had a list, a never-ending list of self-care stuff, right? The baths, the yoga, the walking, the breath work, the meditation, the gratitude practice, the certain amount of water every day, the certain amount of vegetables every day, you name it, I was doing it. And then I hit burnout too. And this one nearly killed me. And that made me question even more, which is why I get, again, quite passionate about, coaches and other leaders that are out there talking about, we just need more habits, right? Habits are the best way for us to stop burnout. I had the habits. I had the healthy habits. I had the healthy behaviors. None of them stopped me reaching burnout for a second time. So when I say I have been joining the dots on burnout for 12 years, I have literally been joining the dots. Every time I think that answers that bit, but what about all of this other stuff? That's what I've been doing. My studies, my coaching, my research, all of my qualifications. And again, in energy cycles and Ayurveda and yoga and meditation and neuroscience and neuropsychology and biology and physiology and neuroscience and coaching, every single bit of that I have been bringing together. Now, all of that has come together in my field that I call burnoutology. And burnoutology is burnout, not just from the psychology lens, though. In the World Health Organization definition that was published in 2019, and lots of other research that's out there about burnout, all comes from the psychology lens. As far as I'm concerned, the psychology lens doesn't answer the physical stuff that was going on within my brain and my body. So burnoutology answers burnout, the underlying factors, the contributing factors, looks at the burnout equation, toxicity minus sense of self equals burnout. But it looks at burnout from the somatics, right? The body, the brain, and the nervous system. You might say the nervous system is the body. Again, different parts. We look at it under different lenses. Psychology is important. The biology is important. The neurology is important. All of it is important. But in burnoutology, we take all of those to look at burnout. We don't just say this is a psychology lens and this is what burnout is, because it's not answering all of the other stuff that's out there. That's what I train coaches in the Burnout Academy. That's what I train burnout informed coaches in. Obviously take it much, much deeper, much, much broader, much, much wider for master burnout coaches. But it's also what I cover every single month in the Burnout Coach Collective. Now, I have trained doctors, medical professionals, therapists, nurses, professors, lecturers, coaches, leaders, managers, HR professionals, engagement professionals. Like, I've trained a lot of people in burnoutology. Why I am so focused at the moment on coaches is because when I think about my first and second burnout, I had leaders around me, I had colleagues around me, I had friends, I had family, I had peers. I had medical professionals that had mentioned this word called burnout, but I didn't understand what was happening. Even if I had have understood it, probably wouldn't have been able to do much about it. Right. And again, I've told you, I know the neuroscience now, why behind that. But if we think about the role of a coach, the coach has that space, right? That container outside of the workplace, separate to family, separate to friends. Now, coaches primarily, right? The role of coaching is primarily to move people forwards, right? To be able to set goals, to keep people moving. But if we think about that confidential container, if we think about that space, we think about the positive impact that coaching can have. If the coaches are burnout informed and understand burnout and understand burnoutology as coaches, think of the difference that could be made. Think of the preventative measures that could happen in a coaching environment, in a coaching space, to stop people getting to burnout in the first place. Think of the recovery. Somebody's been at burnout and now wants to, do I go back to where I was? Do I get a new job? Do I start my own thing? Like, what do I do? If coaches have got the knowledge to know what that looks like, recovery could look and feel so much different. What if it weren't taking years for somebody to get to that point of recovery because the coach was able to intervene at the right point, use the right tools with the right knowledge and the right skills, and support the person in the right way, not in a way that pushes them back into burnout, which is what most coaching at the moment sadly is doing. Because again, coaching by its nature is let's move people forwards. Let's set the goals. Let's create momentum. Let's keep people going. But in that state, what a lot of coaching is doing is moving people one step closer to burnout again. I don't want that. I live with chronic health conditions as a result of burnout. I know that my burnout 1 and burnout 2 were quite extreme. Not everybody is ending up in pain for 7 months. Not everybody is ending up having to have 2 operations in 48 hours. Not everybody's nearly dying. But I also know the horror stories, literal horror stories that I hear every single day. People that are strapped up to heart monitors with their boss on the phone. Are you going to make it back to the board meeting? People that are passing out behind the wheel of a car with their kids in the car. People that are passing out as they cross the road and nearly being hit by a car. People that are having strokes and heart attacks. Young people that are having strokes and heart attacks as a result of burnout. People that are having to walk away from their career, from their lives, from their relationships because of the impact that burnout is having, and because of the lack of understanding in the support systems around them. Because a lot of the thinking still is, well, you've removed the stress, right? So you should be fine now. Like, what's your issue? We're not understanding the long-term, life-impacting, life-changing part of burnout. And I started this by saying I believe with every single part of my being that we can stop burnout. And I know that coaches can play an absolutely fundamental role in stopping burnout because of the unique position that coaches hold in supporting people in whatever stage of life that they're at, whatever stage of career that they're at. Coaches can play a part within that. Now, I said this was going to be a short video. Clearly it hasn't. I can literally talk about this forever, but hopefully that's given you a flavour. I don't just pick stuff out of the air and think, oh, that'll do. This is my lived experience, but a lack of answers that caused me to continue to join the dots. I am so passionate about this because I never ever want anybody to ever have to experience what I went through. I don't want anybody else to get another phone call to tell them that their colleague has died whilst away in a leadership residential. I don't want anybody else's kids to be telling them your job is killing you. I know that we can end burnout when we truly fully know what burnout is. I know that we can end burnout when we understand the impact of it. And I genuinely, from the very bottom of my heart, believe that coaches are the secret weapon in the fight against burnout. That's why I do what I do. Now, if you found this helpful, give it a like, give it a share, send it to somebody that you know that might also find it useful. If you yourself are a coach and you want to understand more about burnout, hit subscribe. New videos every single week. I do Burnout at Breakfast live every Monday, and then my weekly video to give you a snippet about what it is that we're talking about. Right, give you more of the theory, the practice, the science, more of that to go into your own coaching practice. And if you would like to come and join me in the Burnout Academy, either in the Burnout Coach Collective, the Burnout Informed Coach, or the Master Burnout Coach, I will pop the links below. Go take a look at the website. Come and join me. Right, together, let us end burnout. I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. And I will see you in the next video. Take care for now.